Elliot always sat at the farthest desk in the classroom, his presence as unassuming as the gray hoodie he wore. He avoided eye contact, preferring the safety of sketching abstract shapes in his notebook. His classmates, a mix of humans and aliens, chattered and laughed, their voices blending into an indistinct hum that filled the room. Elliot didn't mind being invisible, in fact, he preferred it. Attention brought questions, and questions required answers he didn't have the energy to give. The intergalactic exchange program had been in place for over a decade, fostering unity between Earth and its cosmic neighbors. It wasn't unusual to see alien students walking the halls of Central High, their various forms ranging from sleek and humanoid to creatures with iridescent scales or glowing appendages. Despite their differences, most students adapted quickly, forming bonds that transcended species. Elliot, however, stayed firmly on the sidelines. The first time he saw her, she was standing at the front of the classroom, her posture straight and her gaze unwavering. She introduced herself as Lyra, her voice carrying a melodic quality that silenced the room. Lyra was tall and slender, her lavender skin shimmering faintly under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes, large and golden, seemed to see right through him. She was undeniably alien, yet her presence was somehow comforting. Elliot's curiosity piqued, but he kept his head down, pretending to be engrossed in his notebook. He wasn't used to new students, especially ones as striking as Lyra, and he wasn't sure how to feel about her sudden arrival. Still, he couldn't help stealing glances when he thought no one was looking. Lyra, however, noticed everything. Her gaze swept over the classroom, cataloging every detail with precision. She took an empty seat near the middle of the room, her movements graceful and deliberate. Elliot felt a strange flutter in his chest when their eyes briefly met, but he quickly looked away, berating himself for his nervousness. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra quickly became a fixture at Central High. She excelled in every subject, her intelligence evident in the way she answered questions and engaged in discussions. She was kind but distant, never forming close attachments despite her friendly demeanor. Elliot observed her from afar, intrigued by her poise and the subtle air of mystery that surrounded her. One afternoon, as Elliot sat under the shade of a large oak tree during lunch, sketching in his notebook, a shadow fell over him. He looked up, startled, to find Lyra standing there, holding a tray of food. Her golden eyes studied him with a curiosity that made his cheeks flush. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice soft yet commanding. Elliot hesitated, then nodded, scooting over to make room on the bench. Lyra sat down gracefully, her presence both intimidating and comforting. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. "You're an artist," Lyra said, nodding toward his notebook. Elliot shrugged, his fingers nervously tapping the pencil in his hand. "I guess. Just something I do to pass the time." Lyra tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You're talented. Don't downplay it." Her compliment caught him off guard, and he mumbled a quiet, "thank you," before returning to his sketch. Lyra didn't press further, instead turning her attention to the sprawling campus. The silence between them felt less awkward now, almost companionable. As the weeks passed, Lyra continued to seek Elliot out during lunch and free periods. They fell into an easy routine, their conversations growing more frequent and comfortable. Elliot found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone else, sharing snippets of his thoughts and dreams. Lyra listened intently, her golden eyes always fixed on him, as if he were the most important person in the universe. Despite their growing friendship, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra was hiding something. She was too perfect, too composed. There were moments when she seemed to know things she shouldn't, or when her reactions were a beat too slow, as if she were calculating the correct response. But every time he tried to probe deeper, she deflected with a disarming smile or a change of subject. One evening, as they walked home together after school, a group of older students blocked their path. They were known troublemakers, their reputation for picking on weaker students well established. Elliot's heart sank as they approached, their sneers and jeers making his stomach churn. "Well, if it isn't the shy boy and his alien girlfriend," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. Elliot's cheeks burned, but before he could stammer a reply, Lyra stepped forward. Her golden eyes locked onto the leader of the group, and for a moment, her usual warmth was replaced by something cold and unyielding. "Leave us alone," she said, her voice steady and firm. The group hesitated, clearly taken aback by her unwavering confidence. The leader scoffed, attempting to mask his unease. "Or what?" Lyra didn't reply. Instead, she took a deliberate step forward, her posture radiating an authority that made even Elliot's pulse quicken. The bullies exchanged uneasy glances before muttering curses and slinking away. As they disappeared into the distance, Lyra turned to Elliot, her expression softening. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Elliot nodded, though his mind was racing. There was something about the way she had handled the situation that felt practiced, almost professional. It was as if she had done this sort of thing before. "How did you do that?" he blurted out before he could stop himself. Lyra smiled faintly, her golden eyes meeting his. "Sometimes, confidence is all it takes." But Elliot wasn't convinced. There was more to Lyra than she was letting on, and he was determined to find out what it was. Little did he know, the truth was far beyond anything he could have imagined. That night, Lyra sat alone in her modest room, her calm facade giving way to unease. She activated a small holographic device hidden beneath her desk. The shimmering image of a tall, imposing figure appeared, his expression unreadable. "Report," the figure commanded, his voice deep and authoritative. Lyra straightened, her earlier confidence returning. "The mission proceeds as planned. I've established trust with the target. He shows no signs of suspicion regarding my true identity." The figure's golden eyes, eerily similar to Lyra's, narrowed. "Good. But remain vigilant. The safety of the royal family depends on your success. Any mistake could jeopardize everything." "Understood," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the responsibility she carried. As the hologram faded, Lyra leaned back in her chair, her golden eyes reflecting a mix of determination and worry. She had been trained for this role her entire life, but she hadn't anticipated the challenges that came with pretending to be an ordinary student. And she certainly hadn't anticipated Elliot. For reasons she couldn't fully understand, the shy human boy had managed to break through her carefully constructed defenses. She found herself drawn to his quiet strength and unassuming kindness. It was a complication she couldn't afford, but one she couldn't seem to ignore. The next day, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something about Lyra had shifted. She seemed more distant, her usual warmth tempered by a subtle tension. He wanted to ask if something was wrong, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he focused on his sketchbook, hoping the rhythmic scratch of pencil on paper would calm his racing thoughts. Lyra watched him from across the courtyard, her golden eyes filled with a mixture of longing and resolve. She knew she couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with her mission, but as she looked at Elliot's hunched figure, she couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to protect both him and her secret. It was a question she didn't have the answer to, not yet, anyway. Over the following weeks, events began to escalate. Mysterious figures started appearing around the school, their presence barely noticeable but keenly felt by Lyra. She recognized them as operatives from rival factions, groups intent on uncovering her mission and exploiting it for their gain. Her training allowed her to mask her unease, but the stakes had never felt higher. One evening, while walking home together, Elliot noticed Lyra's gaze darting around, her usual calm demeanor replaced by unease. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Lyra hesitated before answering, her golden eyes meeting his. "It's nothing. Just tired." But Elliot wasn't convinced. He had learned to read her subtle cues, and something was clearly wrong. He decided to keep an eye on her, his protective instincts kicking in despite his usual shyness. That night, Lyra's worst fears were realized. An ambush awaited her near her home, a group of alien operatives armed with advanced weaponry and intent on capturing her. She fought back with the precision and skill of a trained bodyguard, her movements swift and calculated. But she was outnumbered, and just when it seemed she might be overwhelmed, Elliot appeared, his determination overriding his fear. "Lyra," he shouted, distracting the attackers long enough for her to regain the upper hand. Together, they managed to fend off the assailants, their combined efforts leading to a narrow escape. As they caught their breath in a secluded alley, Elliot looked at Lyra with a mix of awe and confusion. "What's going on? Who are they? And, who are you?" Lyra knew she couldn't keep the truth from him any longer. She took a deep breath, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Elliot, I haven't been honest with you. I'm not just a student. I'm a royal bodyguard, assigned to protect the heir to the throne of my planet. They're trying to find and eliminate her, at any cost." Elliot's mind raced as he processed her words. Despite the shock, one thing was clear, he trusted Lyra. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Lyra smiled faintly, her respect for him growing. "We fight back. Together." From that moment, their bond deepened as they navigated.